Okay, welcome everybody to Kim's video journal with her journey through her past up to the present. We'll do our usual where we ask questions, and then Kim's going to read her book, and then we'll pass you over to Kim so where she can carry on. Okay, what is your name?
Kim Talton.
How old are you?
7.
What is your date of birth?
22nd of July 1963.
Who are you talking to?
My husband Steve.
How many children do you have?
4.
And their names?
Carly, Michael, Isley and Christopher.
What season are we in?
Autumn.
What are your grandchildren's names?
Alfie, Alea, Mia, Corey and Sky.
What's your favourite colour?
Orange.
Name a fruit beginning with the letter P.
Potato.
What was your last job?
I was an advanced nurse practitioner caring for patients with bowel cancer, particularly end of life.
What year is it presently?
2020.
What was the song you danced with your granddad?
Moon River.
What is 100 take away 2?
99.
What was the name of yours and Sean's pony?
Angus.
What is your favourite hobby?
Horse riding.
What town do we live in presently?
Battlesbridge.
What day is Christmas Day?
December the 25th.
Hold up 3 fingers.
1, 2, 3.
And name a Carpenter song you like to sing to.
I'm on top of the world.
You have a book next to you, Rosa's Thai Cafe. There's an introduction with 9 subjects. Could you read them out?
Small bites, salads, soups, curries, stir fries, grills and marinades, noodles, rice, sweet things.
Okay. Is there anything about this week you want to talk about? Anything good or bad or that comes to mind?
Steve finally completed my sensory garden, which is lovely. So we've got a nice pergola up, and I've got my Buddha in there, and lots of bamboos and water feature, and yeah, it's a really nice space. So it's a really good place for me to come and just sit when I feel very stressed, which I do a lot.
Yes. Whether today, because you've been nauseous all day today, so whether that was you worrying about things, because obviously with the COVID, that hasn't helped, has it?
No, it hasn't.
So
I don't like Mr. COVID at all. I wish he would go away.
I can't think of anything else. Okay, last week we didn't manage to get to talk, but the week before you talked about your called equiner, and I think you just left work. I think you'd got cars to adapt. We got this place, so obviously once you'd finished work, we thought you'd settle down and calm down a bit, but no. So I'm going to pass you over to Kim to talk about her next stage of her life.
Well, I did step down because I did go part-time for about year. But I was just getting increasingly frustrated actually with the NHS organisation and where it was going, and I didn't want to continue down that path, which is a shame because I believe in the NHS wholeheartedly. But it was really the administration side of things that I had umbrance with. And I'd had enough of doing 50 plus hours, most of it in my own time, week after week after week, year after year. I just thought it was the right time to stop. And I thought retirement would be lovely. Steve was still working. I think he was part-time, but he worked for a children's charity. And used to go into schools doing anger management courses and all sorts of different things for kids. And he'd do one-to-ones with children with challenging behaviours, and so he had a really good job. Neither of us had ever been well paid, but that was by the by. We didn't do our jobs for the money, we did it for the fulfilment of them. And anyway, I realised that I couldn't just sit at home, read books, make food, bake cakes, do all those, knit, crochet, all the things that I've always, sewing, all the things that I've always loved to do. And I threw myself initially into quilt making, and realised that there was a market for that. And then I was approached to do some bespoke tailored clothing for children, so I got involved in that. And I was really enjoying myself, and then I started getting asked about soft furnishings, and so I started making cushions and all sorts of different soft furnishings, blinds and all sorts of things. Very much to the thanks of both my mum and my nan, who were always very resourceful and taught me so many skills when I was a girl. And I really enjoyed it. And then I was approached at one of the craft fairs, and I'd become, by this time, someone had approached me to invite me to join the Guild of Essex craftsmen, and I passed that for I got accepted for that for my soft furnishings and my paper craft, so making cards and scrapbooks and all that sort of thing. And that was really lovely, and then decided I wanted to have a bit more of a business model, so to move myself forward a bit more, and I became a Stampin' Up demonstrator, and I absolutely loved it. And that's how some of you may have found me, because my videos are still available on YouTube for card and paper craft. There's quite a lot of videos of my tutorials on there, and it was during that period that I started to notice some changes in my sight. I was getting lots of flutters, particularly in my left eye, and at the same time I was starting to have word finding problems. I didn't connect the two together at all. Now, I was a very experienced senior nurse, but you got very little training when it came to things like dementia. I had always worked in gastroenterology, so I'd always worked with people with gut problems. That was my specialism. So other things you know about, but you're not necessarily on the ball with it, and you don't always realise something is going on. I mean, I have had consultants who eventually came to us, and I diagnosed with bowel cancer, you know, and these were very experienced doctors, and it doesn't happen often, but it happened, and it just highlights how you can become very specialised and have a little knowledge about things, but not always see what is happening to yourself. Anyway, I did voice my concerns to Steve, and he just kept saying, "Oh, I think it's your medication," or he'd say, "You're just very tired," because I've always had, I've mentioned it before, I'm sure, I've always had insomnia. Sorry, I had to pause because the word wasn't there. So I've always had insomnia to some degree or another. When I'm very stressed, it's much worse. When I'm not so stressed, it's not so bad. I used to do classes from home. We converted my gym. Half of it became a workshop that I would have clients come in, and I'd do classes from home, and sometimes I would go out and do courses for people in the community. And it was something I really enjoyed, and it wasn't something I expected to make lots and lots of money about. It was actually feeding my own love of crafting, really, but being able to recoup a good amount of the cost so that I could pass on my skills, which I really enjoyed. But it was when I used to do sewing classes and things, and it was when I was doing some very detailed sewing work, and I started to realise I was struggling to keep my lines. And it wasn't long after that Steve became quite unwell. Well, he was actually very unwell, and we had a couple of trips to A&E, and they said he had a gallstone, and they monitor it. They didn't think it was a major problem, it was only small. And then one night I woke up in the middle of the night and Steve was crawling on the floor, screaming, really crying out in agony. So he was rushed into hospital and was diagnosed with sepsis. And his gallbladder had actually, because where it was so swollen, had actually eroded into his small bowel. So he was on an awful lot of antibiotics to try and control the situation. And whilst all of this was going on, I decided that I would continue taking our puppy, Bentley, dog training, because I thought it would give me something to do and give me not too many hours to be at home on my own. And as I was driving back from dog training, I pulled up at a junction that I had used every day for decades in order to get home. And suddenly I had people tooting their horns at me, and I thought, oh my goodness, what's going on? Now, I realised that day that I had had problems leading up to it, and I've been saying to Steve, I'm finding it a little bit tough driving at night. And I was actually, although stationary, I was actually in the wrong lane, heading towards oncoming traffic, and I had no idea where I was or how to get out of the situation, and that was so scary. And I thought, oh, I don't think I should be driving anymore. Steve thought I was mad, and for a very long time he didn't want to accept that maybe there was something not quite right going on. Anyway, I was due to have my 2-yearly eye test. So I toddled off, had my eye test. And I know that the 2 years prior to that, I had had some problems with the visual field test, but they didn't think anything significant of it. But when I went at time, they were concerned, and they didn't know what was wrong, but they just felt that I needed to be referred on to the eye specialist, the eye unit. So I was referred over there, and that obviously takes time. So there was a better part of half a year, I think, before I got seen. I got the referral, and went off to the eye unit, and they put me through my paces. And I can remember the nurse that was there, because she said, I need you to concentrate on the dot in the middle, just concentrate on that and just click when you see things coming to your field. And I knew I was really struggling. I absolutely knew I was struggling, and I could hear the nurse huffing every so often and then saying, Kim, I need you to really concentrate just on that dot. And I knew I just wasn't able to do it, but I didn't know why. Anyway, they finished the test, sent me through to see the consultant, sat down, and he said, well, obviously you've had a stroke in the past. And I looked at Steve, and Steve looked at me, and I said, not to my knowledge I have. And he just went, well, look, and he showed me this piece of paper. One side, which obviously was my right eye, was I could see was a normal colour. On the left side it was all black. And he said, this is very suggestive of a stroke, and he was obviously concerned that I had had a stroke there and then. So I was given a referral letter and sent off to Baston Hospital via A&E. And whilst I was in A&E, I did mention to them that I had been having problems finding words, and that I felt my memory was not as good as it used to be. And they did the initial tests in A&E, and I scored very low, and at that point I was then seen by the consultant, and he ordered an MRI, which I was very nervous about because I have an internal spinal cord stimulator, and whilst my current one can be put through a MRI scanner, there is a small piece of metalwork in my belly that is old and embedded in my skin and is not suitable for MRI. So I was really rather nervous. In fact, I nearly passed out when I got there, was sitting waiting for this scan, because I was so concerned about pieces of matter pinging out of me and damaging the very expensive MRI scanner. But they reassured me that they would do it at low intensity, which would be suitable for my situation. So I was more relieved then. And when the team came round to see me, they actually admitted me, which I wasn't very happy about, and the team came to see me and said, well, we've got the initial results of your test, and it shows that you have brain atrophy. And I just looked at him and I said, do you mean dementia? And he said, yes. And I just sat there and thought, oh shit. That was all I could think, was, oh shit. Sorry for the language. I was not happy to stay in. I really wasn't. And in the end, I mean, the first night I was up and pacing all night long. I didn't realise I was up pacing all night long. It was the other ladies in the ward with me who told me in the morning that I have been up and pacing all night long. There was a reason, and that is they have got my medication level wrong, my drugs wrong, and that was enough to tip me over and make me go a bit too lully. Thankfully we got it resolved, but they still wanted me to stay in another night, and the only way they could get me to stay in that night was to agree to give me a sleeping tablet so that I would sleep soundly. And I literally shut my eyes and woke up and it was morning, and I didn't have any recollection of the night at all, which I think my ladies in the ward with me were quite pleased about. And I then said, no, I've really had enough in hospital. I really don't want to be spending time in hospital if I absolutely don't need to. So I was referred to a neurologist. He felt that it wasn't a typical Alzheimer's, so it took a bit of time, but eventually I was referred to the specialist in, I'd say London, it's not London, but that sort of area, big hospital there, Queen's Hospital, and that started a whole, well, just so many tests that had to be done. But if I backtrack a little bit, when I was diagnosed, Steve and I spent probably three days sobbing, absolutely sobbing, mourning for what was to come, really, that preemptive grief for the loss of myself, and for Steve, the loss of me, to come in the future. And then one day I sort of woke up shortly after and just said, right, enough of this. I haven't got time to be stressing and getting upset over things I have absolutely no control of. And there changed the woman, because I had spent my life fretting over absolutely everything. I've always been a terrible worrier, and I like everything to be just right, just like so many other people. But it was a wake-up call, and I tried to live my life as best I can, really. It was last year, the end of last year, I think, when I was finally diagnosed with posterior cortical atrophy. I'd never heard of that. Didn't have a clue what it was. I guessed it was something to do with the dementia, but I had no idea what posterior cortical atrophy was. And after many tests, they finally concluded that I had posterior cortical atrophy. And basically what that means is not only have the frontal lobes of my brain been affected by dementia, but so has the back of my brain. So a double whammy there. I have to be rare. There's only 2% of all Alzheimer's patients will get posterior cortical atrophy. That's how rare it is. And that's why it took such a long time to diagnose it, because I had to make sure it was right. And it changes your perception. I've struggled to like on the surface, I can lose objects. Now what I'm learning gradually is if I sort of strobe, so if I sort of go side to side, sometimes I'll then catch an image of what I thought was there is actually there. And things like reaching for items, I've broken it. Well, in the early days I broke so many of our glasses. We've had to go over to melamine to make it safer. So it gives me challenges with dressing. I've worn some very strange outfits, Steve would say. So washing it, dressing isn't quite an issue for me. As I say, the strange thing is my maternal grandmother, had to have a benign tumour of her eye removed when I was 4, and staying with my grandparents because my mum had cancer, and she was having to learn to get that, to compensate for that loss of sense, and that's what I now have. I can remember her always pouring a hot drink and having her finger just inside the mug, so she knew when to stop pouring the milk or the hot water. And now I do that because I can't be sure that I'm going to put it down properly, because some of the time I will put it down and actually I'm putting it down on the edge of a glass, and wham, down it goes, smash we go, glass everywhere. So we're kind of still in that ongoing process of adapting, because things are changing subtly all the time, and we're having to find ways to adjust to those situations. Which is kind of where we are now. That's probably a good place to stop for this week. And I do apologise, we keep being very naughty and missing weeks. But, what with our vow renewal, which went really well, and doing our sensory garden, and getting the gazebo up and all that. So we'll strive to do better and be more consistent, says the person with Alzheimer's. I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening.
Finishing. Okay, thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you next week. Take care.